content today was going to be something very different than this. But then I got curious because I saw that there was a feminist frequency review of Watch Dogs 2. And I was interested in comparing notes, see how I thought it was going to be Anita Sarkeesian reviewing the game. But no, they farmed out the bullshit. And you'll notice it is not Anita Sarkeesian reviewing this game. It is Carolyn Petit. And I don't know who Carolyn Petit is. Let's open it up and see. Awesome. Off to a great start. Okay, so we're going to assume, for the purposes of this review, that Carolyn Petit is a cisgendered white blonde woman with an abnormally large head, according to this avatar. That is how Carolyn Petit is performing for this Watch Dogs review. And what I decided to do here is give my response to this, not to just throw shade, although I won't be able to refrain from the gamer rant, but it's more about why it's important to have multiple feminist perspectives in video games, because no one perspective can be the beginning and the end of the discussion. So please take that as a caveat, because I'm gonna take the limiter off some. This is marked rant, so that's where it's coming from, with that warning. And the caveat that I've already declared, that I really like this game. I really recommend it. Let's dive in. Poignant opening. In our hyper-connected world, where most of us carry around handheld devices that keep us linked to the internet at all times, and tech companies monitor our behavior and purchasing habits constantly, a game in which you harness that technological web to disrupt the schemes of powerful corporations make perfect sense. But with 2014's Watch Dogs, Ubisoft failed to turn this premise into a compelling game. Watch Dogs 2 makes some meaningful improvements on its predecessor. It gives us a more memorable hero and supporting cast in a San Francisco that exudes a bit more personality than the first game's setting did. Unfortunately, Watch Dogs 2 still fails where it matters most, trotting out a series of crushingly repetitive missions that never comes close to making you feel like a hacker extraordinaire. And now for our commercial break. Demanding money from you. $25, $50, or $100 suggested recommendations. Holy cow! For advocating for more inclusive intersectional media and increasing cultural conversation around gender, sexuality, and race. They need your help more than ever before, because they have to, I guess, pay the mushroom farmers that don't have a bio. And then continuing embracing feminist values, rejecting sexism, and challenging all form of unjust representations of individuals and communities. Okay, I'm ready for the feminism, but first, if you expect a video game to make you feel like a real hacker, I got some swampland in Florida for you where you too can become a mouse. The game does not attempt to immerse you in what it feels like to be a hacker. The game immerses you in hacker culture. Marcus Holloway is more like an action hero hacker. He's not the mundane, sedentary reality that most hackers experience. And so much of hacker culture adds kind of, dimension and color, shape and color to a world that is relatively esoteric and somewhat monotonous. You need a lot of patience to do, not just the coding, but the social engineering that's required for most modern day hacks. Most, major hacks have a requirement that somebody at your target fuck up before you can get into their system. And so you're not going to be blasting 400 emails in a phishing scheme to complete these missions. It's fantasy. And I think that you have to have the right perspective going in. The problem with the first game is it was a little too true to life about the lack of personality a lot of hackers have, and it wasn't fun as a result. They put a lot more internet culture into this game, and I think it really worked well. But we're looking to have fun here, not to be part of a hacker simulator. And that's all I'll say about that for now. Clicking past the shill banner. Nearly every main story mission has you infiltrating some heavily guarded facility or another in order to steal something or hack something, and once you find a strategy that works for you, it's very easy to fall into a pattern of approaching all these missions in more or less the same way. That is your own damn fault if you do that. And I say that completely bluntly. The entire purpose of an open world game is there are 6 or 7, or in this case 9 or 10 ways to approach every mission. You have a lot of tools at your disposal, and the whole point of these games is to maximize player freedom. You can't just have the game tell you how to play in rigid terms. And if you're going to approach every mission the exact same way, that is your call. But you should be doing that because you enjoy it, not because you feel compelled to, because you're really not. You'll see that this mushroom farmer's way of approaching the game is very freaking different from mine. And I have a theory as to why, but let's get back into the review. Your character, Marcus Holloway, can't take much punishment. Much punishment, meaning he can't get shot 6 times and walk away, you know, like a real person without a bulletproof vest does. Even in a bulletproof vest, you get hit by a high enough caliber gun, you go down because it knocks the wind out of you. It just doesn't kill you the way it would. So this can't take much punishment. Oh, you mean it's, you know, it's the equivalent of playing most shooters on hardcore mode. And the environments are filled with enemies who will immediately call for more reinforcements at any sight of trouble, so you're discouraged from relying on the all-out guns-blazing approach, which sounds like a criticism here. I actually really liked that part of the game. I liked the fact that in some missions they could call for unlimited reinforcements. You know, because if you're dealing with the police, it's not just going to be one squad car and that's it. If that squad car needs more help, then they call it in. And I thought this got around that exploit that I ended up using too often in Assassin's Creed is, yes, there could be an alarm, but if it's not a hard fail, it really wasn't that hard to take out more guys. In Watch Dogs 2, it does become overwhelming after a certain point. And I did say that the stick to cover, because the movement radius of the main character, because Marcus is a big dude and it's still basically, you know, Ubi programming 101, feels very Splinter Cell-y Rainbow Six. And so that doesn't work as well as it could, but that is not the way you're intended to play the game. That being said, later in the game, when you level up your weapons, the shooting, the gunplay actually isn't bad. And I used it a few times and actually had fun with it. It's all about upgrading those weapons and upgrading those skills so that it is something that is useful instead of just a last resort. Moving on. This makes sense in a game that wants you to use your hacking abilities to tackle the situations you're faced with. So why the hell did you complain about it? But because failure in this game can be so punishing and send you back so far, oh, poor princess! I tended to complete most missions using the same tactic. You already said that, so you're being redundant about your redundancy. The core of my strategy was hanging back, hacking into the building's security systems, and picking off the enemies who could call for reinforcements one by forging criminal records and having the police come in and arrest or kill them. It was passive and often tedious, but it got the job done. Well, if you find it tedious, why not learn to play the game another way that's more fun for you? Because my way of playing, I almost never used the police summons in the game. I did it for the gang that was involved in human trafficking because I hated their guts. But I didn't use it for run-of-the-mill security guards. In fact, I tried very hard not to kill security guards. I tried to use non-lethal tactics, and I would never, ever shoot a dog with anything more than the stun gun. I couldn't shoot a dog. And the game didn't force me to shoot dogs with anything but a stun gun. It might take me a few tries to play the level, but I didn't want to shoot damn dogs. That wasn't fun for me. So if a form of play isn't fun for you, find another way to play. There's so many ways. You have a drone, a drone copter, which I used a lot, and you have a little jumper drone that goes along and can actually physically interact with objects. I use that a lot too. So no, you don't just have to, hang back and pick off enemies who can call for reinforcements. Don't get detected in the first place. Get good. And then there's other ways to disrupt those calls for reinforcements. You can just jam the cell phone. You don't have to forge criminal records. You can choose to. You can also start gang fights. And I did that rarely. I preferred to go in clean, because the downside to the summoning the police is not everybody went quietly. So sometimes it would launch into this massive gunfight that actually made things more difficult for you. And I thought that was pretty cool, because it meant you couldn't play the game the same way every single time and get a fun result. Of course, sometimes it's strength when a game punishes you for failure. In games with precise combat, the prospect of a significant setback can raise the stakes, encouraging you to master the mechanics and making your victories all the more rewarding. But Watch Dogs 2 is no such game. This is no Dark Souls. Oh, spare me the elitist crap. No, it's no Dark Souls. Dark Souls is a hack and slash action game with minimal plot. You infer the plot by the aesthetics. Yeah, this isn't Dark Souls. And what kind of pretentious mushroom farmer do you have to be to expect a game like Watch Dogs 2, which is open to a lot of different playstyles, and gamers who don't have the patience, people who don't identify themselves as gamers, they want a fun experience that gives them a lot of freedom to drive cars and, interact with things, and a plot and characters they find fun without having too much challenge. They're completely different games. But, it's not just, is it no Dark Souls? No. This is a by-the-numbers open-world game with mediocre gunplay and systems that interact so erratically that all you can do is try to manage them well enough to complete your objective and get it alive. Well, if the systems behave erratically, why do you use the same system over and over again? Perhaps it's not that the systems behave erratically. Perhaps the systems are trying to stop you from being a boring-ass open-world player and doing everything the exact same way, even though you think it's boring. This isn't how you got your bullshit liberal arts degree. This is a video game. And by that I mean, yeah, liberal arts is big on regurgitation. Moving on. Like I said, this was a rant. As shabby as the mission design is, the game deserves some credit for its obviously well-intentioned efforts to acknowledge the existence of structural racism. Okay. A by-the-numbers open-world game takes efforts to acknowledge the existence of structural racism. Is it a by-the-numbers game? Or does it strive for some social commentary? Which is it? Only your dentist knows for sure. At one point, the young black protagonist Marcus discusses the racial profiling tactics that tagged him as a criminal risk, and his brother-in-arms Horatio, whose day job is at the Google stand-in noodle, comments frankly on the racism and condescension he experiences as one of the only people of color in an overwhelmingly white company. This might give you the sense that they were standing on street corners going, testify, testify. Comments frankly isn't accurate. They were joking around. They were joking around in the way that, I've heard people do. It was so funny that at the end of the scene, Horatio goes, now come on, get out of here, man. You're making people nervous. And things like that. It wasn't commenting frankly. It was joking around. And it was, what I liked about it is that it wasn't raw. It wasn't slutwalk territory. It was just two guys going, this is bullshit. Yeah, this is bullshit. And getting on with their lives. The presence of Miranda, a black trans councilwoman who does what she can to help Marcus and his colleagues in the hacker collective known as DedSec, is also welcome. Okay, look at this sentence, because these sorts of things that tell you about a person's perspective. The presence of Miranda, not the role. The presence, the fact that she merely exists is welcome. And I disagree with this. I think that you don't put someone in just because they're black and trans. You put them in because this is a role for a black trans person. And that's what's amazing about this this particular character, is the fact that she's black is relevant, the fact that she's trans is relevant, the fact that she's a councilwoman is relevant, and the fact that she's a woman, trans or cis, is relevant as well. And it's not just about presence, it's about execution. And credit where credit's due, Miranda is a really good character that turns that trope, and it's the same trope as the I forget her name, the Viola Davis character in Luke Cage. It's the same trope of that black female councilwoman, but done differently. And the fact that she's trans is relevant because the Scientology type group leaked information about her surgeries when she wouldn't do what they wanted. So it wasn't just, oh, here's a trans person. It was actually a major, not only plot point, but motivation that, you know, she dislikes these people intensely and wants to see them taken down because they're dicks. And on the other hand, and I refuse to use this word, not because I have any interest in getting into the whole gender neutral word debate, but because it sounds like a latex bondage gear company. Latinx. It sounds like some strap-on that attaches to your taint or something like that. Like, I can't. It's the gender neutral form of Latino, Latina, because I guess Latin is not politically correct somehow. But why you can't say Latino gangs? Oh, because that's patriarchal. Well, yes it is, but they are predominantly male gang members. There aren't very many female gang members. They're notable by their do-rags tied around their hair, but it would be accurate to say it is predominantly Latino men. So why not just say Latino instead of looking like a douchebag social justice stereotype? On the other hand, Latin people in Watch Dogs 2 are primarily represented as the most cliche type of gang members imaginable. How ironic. There are Chinese gangs as well. And on the surface, they may seem like stereotypes, but if you actually search, because this is a game about hackers, meaning you have to hack around to learn stuff, but there's more to it than that. There's more nuance than that. You don't get a bunch of conversations with them because they're fucking gangs, but there is more if you look. And the Chinese gang, who I despised because they're human traffickers, but there's some interesting stuff about the leader of that gang, which again is another trope that's also used in Daredevil. I think the Watch Dogs writers read a lot of comic books, but it still was interesting, and it still just added that little extra reminder that these are people you're considering killing. I don't care. I killed them anyway. I have no patience for human traffickers, but that's my choice. Someone could make another choice, and that's the point of open world games. As important as it is that games give us heroes and supporting characters who break from the long-established molds... Wait a minute. Is this a by-the-numbers open world game? Or does it have heroes and supporting characters who break from the long-established molds? You can't have a by-the-numbers game that breaks from the long-established molds. These cliche-ematics are just trying to seem above it all, when in fact they make no sense. This is liberal arts word salad that, if you actually break it down and you actually do what I'm doing, contradicts itself and makes no sense. And this is what I cannot stand about it. This is the regurgitation. This is written like an early draft of a paper that would never get through courses that aren't bullshit. But moving on. There's more to great characterization than simply ticking off a few boxes on a diversity checklist. Then why is the presence of the black trans councilwoman what matters? Again, word salad. And Watch Dogs 2 falls short here. Oh, really? And they don't use a real cast photo because that would put the lie to this comment. You've got a main cast where everyone is facing some sort of loss of privilege. And just because there's 2 white guys there doesn't mean that doesn't count. You've got 2 black guys that they pre-established. You've got Sitara, who is an East Indian woman, and you know, you got to find her backstory, but it's definitely there. You've got Wrench, this guy here, who has such crippling social anxiety that he can't actually talk to people without this mask that basically translates his emotions. You've got the crossover character from the first game, Ray. For people who don't remember, Ray was the guy who was living in that junkyard from CTOS, because he was one of the original coders on the project that was a whistleblower that was basically run out of town. And so he's sort of the crossover. He's probably the most inherently privileged of all the main characters because the last member of the team, Josh, is autistic. And he's gloriously written. I mean, as fun as Wrench's dialogue is, I loved that they managed to make Josh an important part of the team and a fun part of the team, but they never broke his character voice. It was so good. He was so consistent, and the really lovable moments were informed by the fact that he's on the spectrum. He didn't just suddenly become higher functioning because it meant it was going to be a good line. One of the best pieces of dialogue in the game is the rest of them explaining what cornholing is to Josh. It's hilarious. Another amazing part of this game is the main bad guy has a man bun, and his last name is Dusan, but they keep calling him Duchesne or Dushan. They keep saying douche instead of deuce. There is no CH. His name is spelled D-U-S-A-N, and they never call attention to it, but they keep calling the guy a douche. It's so good. But they talk about the fact that his penis probably has its own man bun, and it is hilarious. It is precisely the kind of punchy talk that you get when you're really frustrated by having your neck stepped on, metaphorically, by the man. But despite this, the game falls short. Now, evidence, please. Why does the game fall short in terms of diversity? Its characters relate to each other more in geek sci-fi references and cheesy one-liners than in anything that actually reveals to us who they are and what makes them tick. So it's hard to get invested in their struggle and their relationships with each other. Okay. First of all, hackers do not share their feels in the way that safe space coloring book mushroom farmers probably like. But they certainly do have very emotional moments, and you definitely feel the bonds in this game, but it's through humor. It's, you do have to read between the lines. You do have to really notice what position they take on given issues, and they communicate their sort of wants and needs through that. It's not the typical, I'm going to stand here and do a monologue about who I am and how I'm relevant to this plot. No, you have to figure it out for yourself. But there is a lot of depth to these characters. This game is exceptionally well written, to the point that it apparently goes over mushroom farmers' heads. But that's because, why are they mushroom farmers? Because they're constantly knee-deep in bullshit. Hence the metaphor. But if you hang out with a lot of people in this culture, the way they talk in this game is the way they talk. I should say the way we talk, because I talk this way. Darmok, motherfuckers. If you don't know what that means, watch more Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm not going to explain it. Because if you have to explain it, if you don't know the code, then you don't belong. Then you're a freaking narc and you shouldn't be there. That's the whole purpose for the jargon. That's the whole purpose for the dialogue. Because if you can talk the talk, then one of us. It's a way to separate the actual, techies from the mushroom farmers. The people that, yeah, I'm here too. I like computers. I took a coding course. Let's hang out. Let's make this a safe space. And no, this entire world is not a safe space, which means they don't open up. They express emotional content through their actions and through their jokes and through their passion for the work. But this isn't a tell me about your feels environment. And that was what I really liked about it. It's realistic. Watch Dogs 2 San Francisco setting is recognizable but doesn't feel authentic. Despite being packed with landmarks and familiar locations, including San Francisco's greatest treasure, the sea lions down at Pier 39. I thought that was a Golden Gate Bridge, but silly. Sea lions. Okay. It's great to see pride flags flying in certain spots around the city, and Watch Dogs 2 makes no effort to minimize or deny the existence of SF's queer community. But for all that, the game's concerns feel oddly detached from the real issues that face San Francisco today. Graffiti that reads, "Artists used to live here," poignantly speaks to the fact that entire communities are being driven out of the city as tech companies make life here unsustainable for so many, and the blah, 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 blah. So why isn't DedSec using its power to stand up for marginalized communities? Why isn't DedSec fighting for affordable housing and fighting against the political injustice that specifically targets people of color? Why not confront the things that are really happening here, the things that really matter to the people who call San Francisco home? Well, nice use of the rule of three here, but here's the thing. Why isn't DedSec fighting against the police injustice that specifically targets people of color? Let's go back here. Where is it? At one point, the young black protagonist Marcus discusses the racial profiling tactics that tagged him as a criminal risk. Let me read that again. At one point, stop it. At one point, the young black protagonist Marcus discusses the racial profiling tactics that tagged him as a criminal risk. Scroll down. Why isn't DedSec fighting against the police injustice that specifically targets people of color? It's the central fucking plot of the game. Was it so big that you fucking missed it? Mushroom Farmer? That's the whole point. The guy got arrested for a crime he was gonna do and got community service, which is still a fucking conviction, even though there was actually no evidence because the crime hadn't happened yet. And part of the reason he was targeted, that they point out in the algorithm, is it was coded to recognize race. And there's a whole discussion about how computers don't recognize race until people teach them to recognize why race matters. And they talked about how racism can end up in these autonomous systems. But that isn't fighting. There's a whole Black Lives Matter inspired plot that I used a piece of on the footage I used in my last Tuesday's video. No, it doesn't come right down on the side that all cops are bad, no. But it does have them fighting against the police injustice. It's a mission where you have to stop these corrupt cops who are using this fucking Big Brother meets Little Brother computer system to do corrupt shit and kill people and do bad things to people. And in terms of the affordable housing, there's a specific quest in the game that actually has you discover that the city is deliberately running up the electricity, sorry, you guys don't call it hydro, the utility bills of the people who live in one of the few remaining affordable neighborhoods, because they want to drive up the cost without driving up the rents so they can gentrify the neighborhood. It's a mission in the game. And in terms of using its power to stand up for marginalized communities, the whole moral of the game is in a big data environment, every regular person is marginalized. And people are just giving away their data because they don't understand that if you turn over all your data to big companies like this that have no oversight, then you are one click away from having your life yanked out from under you because some profiling means you could be a bad credit risk based on your friends, or you're potentially kind of sort of highly likely to do something that a health insurance company may not want you to do. They had this thing where they're monitoring junk food consumption. This is way beyond marginalized communities. This is marginalizing the entire United States. That's the purpose of this game. And while they do have, the Black Lives Matter stuff and the outing of trans people's surgeries and they have this stuff, they don't have protests. Well, they actually do have a protest in it, come to think of it, against Scientology. But standing up for marginalized communities isn't the average person's idea of fun. Driving fast cars and shooting at things is. So the fact that they were able to jam this all into this game while still having it have familiar mechanics is, I think, a major feat. But also, why isn't DedSec using its power to stand up for marginalized communities? Because it's fucking not. Because that's not their cause. Because they come from such a diverse backgrounds. Which one are they going to pick? They have to agree which to go after. And, you think the autistic guy and the cyborg are particularly going to care about issues affecting the black community? No, it's got to be something they can all agree on. And, why isn't DedSec using its power to stand up for the mentally ill? Why isn't DedSec using its power to stand up for the poor? Because it's fucking not. They're hackers. They use their power to stand up to the man in terms of the information that's being passed around. That's their issue. It's not that they don't have an issue. It's an issue that the mushroom farmer didn't relate to. And this is a phenomenon that my author friends call the werewolf cookbook effect. This is a good cookbook, but I like werewolves, 1 star. And not every game has to stand up for causes, okay? To have meaning. This is about information. This is about, we're even beyond big government. We're into big data. And the idea that Google and Facebook could be meaningfully controlling our lives terrifies me, because if you really look at it, and this is what this game forces you to look at, those companies are controlled by raging douchebags. That should be scary enough. Moving on. Perhaps the strangest thing about all of Watch Dogs 2, though, is its uneasy relationship with power. That's not strange. That's the entire point of the friggin' game. The issue with hackers is that they have all this power. They could be doing more useful stuff with it, and instead they use it to spam people with poop emojis and unicorns farting rainbows. That is the thing that makes hackers fascinating. And this is where I start ranting, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. But I say all the time, you can't review games like movies. You have to review a game like a game. And the relationship with power in Watch Dogs is about 80% tied to what you do with it. And it does it so well that the few instances that the game slips from that and actually takes away choice, like the ATM hack mini game, where I wanted more, might have been able to do it and I could never figure it out, but I thought you just tapped L1 and it was a scripted reaction. I would have preferred to be able to choose what to do to the people when you're whether you give them money or take it away. Because one of the most interesting things I find when you're just farting around, cruising around, because that's the point of the open world, the entire experience is supposed to be seamless. There's not supposed to be any moments where you feel like you're just trying to get from point A to point B. that's the brass ring of open world games. And so when you're walking around deciding who to hack, because if you don't do the little hacks and you don't do the money drops, you can't get any money to buy um, the cars and the clothes, and the clothes are actually pretty fun. There's some interesting selections. But deciding who to hack, if you're going to decide at all, is one of the most interesting overlooked bits of interactivity I feel like I have in the game. Because you don't have to hack everyone. And you can, but you don't have to, and I don't. And that little feeling of playing God is really unnerving. And so it's not a strange part about the Watch Dogs franchise. It's an integral part that it has an uneasy relationship with power. And I love that about the game. But let's move on. Ostensibly, DedSec is all about waking up the populace, getting them to understand how power is abused by politicians, tech companies, and government agencies to limit people's freedom to think and act for themselves. Oh, so she does know what their issue is. So if she knows that that's their issue, waking up the populace, getting them to understand how power is abused by politicians, tech companies, and government agencies to limit people's freedom to think and act for themselves, how is that not, by proxy, standing up for marginalized communities? I think it very much is. Because the whole point of why aren't you fighting for marginalized communities? Because right now, under the structure of this game, under this dystopia, marginalized communities can't fight. The system is completely fixed. That's the whole friggin' point. So the mushroom farmer asks questions in this review for dramatic effect, but it's really disingenuous. The reason they're not fighting for marginalized communities is, like I said, the entire United States is now marginalized by the abuse of big data. And the kicker is that people are giving it up willingly for convenience. But it goes on. What DedSec never does is turn that questioning lens on its own use and abuse of power. Not true. 100% not true. If you talk to the other members of DedSec, there are moral questions raised as part of the plot. There are arguments that become as big as, is manipulating code just as bad as the original code when it's used to control people? That's a big question that, Marcus, as a neurotypical person, says to Josh, you shouldn't be looking at people's personal information. And Josh, as a neuroatypical person, says it would be irresponsible not to look. He's helping them. And because he doesn't have that typical reading of social cues that people who aren't on the spectrum has, he has a different perspective. And I thought that was amazing. But then there's little moments where Wrench really loves machines. He hates animals. He's terrified of them, but he really likes machines. And so there was a whole fight about whether or not to blow up a robot he'd gotten really attached to. And for most people, they're like, well, who cares? It's a robot. But you are not a techie, ladies and gentlemen. Most techies, I know I could relate to that it's silly, but when your computer breaks, you feel like something died. And when you're switching over computers, you're kind of like, thank you for your service. You can rest now. It's weird. You get this weird, you name your computers and you get personalities, and you end up talking to them, and it sounds very strange, but you have to be a techie to really understand it. And I thought that bit was, really great. And the fact that Sitara has this propagandist's view of the world, and she calls herself, a street artist, but she is a propagandist. She is trying to get people to download DedSec's app, to willingly give them their processing power. The one difference between DedSec and the government in this game is that people opt into DedSec. They can't even opt out of CTOS. But She is a propagandist. Her art has a purpose. It is not art for art's sake. She is trying to influence people to do what she wants them to do. And that is very much, questioning lens on its own use and abuse of power. There's all these debates, especially earlier in the game, about doing things that are right versus doing things that are effective. And the closer of this review gets very ironic, because it was never lost on me that playing as a young black man who had been profiled as a likely criminal because of his race. Remember that thing about not police abuse? Yeah, okay. I'm confused now. I then harnessed the power of technology to forge criminal records for dozens and dozens of innocent people and watch them get marched off by the cops themselves. But hey, what was I going to do? I had a mission to complete. And this is a profound difference in the philosophy of game reviews. You don't have to do that. I didn't do that precisely because they were innocent people and I had other choices. The mushroom farmer chose to do that despite there being other options, because for them it was the most expedient. So they sit here complaining about why isn't it using its power to stand up for marginalized communities? Why isn't it fighting against affordable housing? Why not confront the things that are really happening here? Because you as the player chose not to. You got out of your experience what you put in. And in video games, especially open world video games like this, it is the experience that is the true narrative, not the plot points, not the dialogue. It is the experience you have playing the game. And this is Ubisoft's niche in the industry. Their games are buggy, including Watch Dogs, and they don't, all their games are yes, they do open world games. But do we criticize Bethesda for primarily doing first person games? That's what they're good at. It's their niche. Ubisoft is experimenting with what you can do in an open world game. And part of that is giving people freedoms and seeing what they do. And what I found so interesting about the fact that you could exploit people that way, even though your character knows what it's like to be exploited, this is very real in what my outreach worker friend calls the trauma and the drama of marginalized communities. It gets to a point where you sort of go, it doesn't matter how you get it as long as you get it. Claw your way to the top, motherfuckers. And so that's a valid choice. I'm not saying this person is a bad person for making that choice in game. I'm saying they have blinders on by complaining about the poignance of it. Why do people join gangs in these neighborhoods? Precisely for that reason. You want power to fuck people up because you've been fucked up. Now, Miss Blonde Mushroom Farmer may not be able to relate to that because she seems to care very much about living in the San Francisco area, which means, she probably lives there. And I mean, that's where feminist frequency is based. There's an element of privilege here that seems to be preventing her from connecting with this game in a way that other people can. And if you're part of a marginalized community, instead of just looking down from your, San Francisco overpriced apartment and going, oh, those poor people, why doesn't someone help them? Why doesn't someone take on their cause? Oh no, I'm far too busy. Instead, people who actually walk these streets, don't turn that into a hooker thing. Okay, turn it into a hooker thing. But realize that just because someone is marginalized does not mean they're a good person. And if she chose to play Marcus as a not very good person, the thing that's awesome about this game is that that's a valid choice. And you understand why a guy like Marcus would make that choice, because the system has already made him into a criminal and he feels like there's a bigger picture at play here. You know, the argument is it's that revolutionary thinking of what are a few lives, what are a few hundred lives, what are a few thousand lives, when the freedom of the entire planet is at stake. And there really is that existential crisis, but I won't spoil it. But at the same time, I chose something different. I tried to minimize casualties. You can't completely eliminate them, I don't think. But you try to minimize them as much as possible. And I did feel very uneasy with the fact how easy it was to accidentally blow someone up. But that's the reality of being a soldier. And that is essentially what Marcus is. It's like an urban soldier environment. It's a street soldier. And people get hurt and people die. And there's a ground truth to that, you know, the mushroom farmers, knee deep in bullshit, miss. And yeah, it's an uncomfortable truth. It's an inconvenient truth. The idea that people that blonde white women are very comfortable feeling sorry for are capable of doing bad things. Sorry to, you know, gray up your black and white reality, but that's just the truth. And the reality of marginalization is, if you look at marginalized peoples, they tend to have very checkered past, because when you're truly marginalized, you don't have any good choices. So you take the least bad one, and I'm a broken record about that, but that's what I found so amazing about this game. And could you say I'm reading into this? Yeah, I'm very self-aware of that, but my read on it is no more valid than the mushroom farmers here. Le petit champignon. Because it's interactive. This isn't a movie. This isn't a test with a right or wrong answer. This is a video game, and a video game's not complete until the player picks up a controller and starts to move the main character around. That's the beauty of a video game. A book is complete, whether anyone else ever reads it or not. It's a self-contained entity. But a video game, when it ships, is unfinished. And every single person who plays this game gets a unique experience. And that's true of every game, because even if the plot is fixed, and even if it's a complete tunnel shooter, the moments are different. The shades vary, even if the color doesn't. And that's the glory and the beauty and the power and the magic of video games that I feel isn't done a service to, you know, by reviews of this sort. Never mind that a website called Feminist Frequency didn't talk about the most prominent female character in the whole game, that's Sitara, and like I said, she's a propagandist at her core. And what's interesting is she's the one that comes from money in the group. And she kind of chucked it all to be a rebel. And that's very significant to how she views the world and how she views the missions. And this isn't a question of having to choose whether I'm right and Le Petit Champignon is wrong. It's an example of how different the perspectives are and how passionately argued they can be. And this is why, for me, in video games, the back and forth, the dialogue, the sharing of the experiences is more important than what the outcome of an individual review is. I think that a well-written review shows your steps, it shows the work, like, why do you have this opinion? And this is difficult sometimes because there's spoilers and plot points and you have to be careful, but you should provide the reader with some tangible details to back up, you know, why you claim the game is by the numbers on one point but breaks the mold on others. You know, a more accurate take on the whole thing would be, and I disagree with this too, but it's fairer, that it uses very familiar gameplay mechanics to tell stories about different kinds of people. Because, you can only change one wheel at a time without the cart falling over. Another metaphor. But it does more than that. The very simple fact that it's an open world game that has a heavy puzzle component, I've never experienced that before. Because puzzles, you have to pass them or you have to fail them. There's no BSing your way through a puzzle. There's a solution. And a lot of them are quite challenging, and I can see a lot of people not having the patience to get through them, or they'll look it up on a walkthrough and do it that way. I really enjoyed them. The hacking puzzles are some of my favorite parts of the game, and going around and trying to figure out how to get up that building. Like, they're all little puzzles, and it was a more extensive part of the game than you normally see in open world games. I really enjoyed that, but that's a teeny bit of innovation, not a quantum leap. But quantum leaps and innovation don't sell, and so I think we should be rewarding Ubisoft, first of all, for making a game with minor bugs, but that's okay because it's the Fallout 4 benchmark. Is it less buggy than Fallout 4? Okay, then you get a pass, right? So, and it shouldn't be that way, but if Fallout 4 gets all this praise despite being riddled with bugs, well, that's the open world litmus test. But this is what people talk about when they say there's too much politics in game reviews, right? And to an extent, I expect a certain amount of politics from a feminist frequency review. I don't expect to feel like I played a completely different game. And this is... I realize I did play a completely different game because I played the game completely differently. If that makes any sense. And again, that's the beauty of video games. And this is why we need spirited but respectful debate. And I took some goofs. I made some fun, but I made very clear that this was a rant off the top, and I mean no disrespect. It was just for entertainment value as well as just defending a game I believe quite strongly in. No disrespect, no personal attack. This is ideas, not attacking people. I don't even know who this person is. There isn't even a bio. Data not found. And I think we need to be able to do this. And I think we need to be able to do this on an even playing field. And I think that organizations like Feminist Frequency need to be a little bit more self-aware of their own role in the industry now. I mean, when you have the balls to start asking people for $100 a month, your establishment. And so this fight the man thing, when this is a service that's essentially been embraced by the video game industry, that, yes, they're controversial, but let's face it, they are the go-to source for feminism in video games now. They are the establishment when it comes to feminism in video games. And so this underdog status approach they're taking isn't working anymore because they have a far greater platform. They have a lot of earned media help. That's how they rose. All this PR that they get. They don't have to buy ads. They don't have to, people give them $100 a month, apparently. Or they want you to think they do. But the media has been very supportive of Feminist Frequency. And they've had a lot of celebrity support as well out, in-game, the gaming celebrities, and then people like Joss Whedon. And it's ironic that people who write reviews like this have to be reminded about privileged positions. But this is what gamers talk about, the fact that people are dumping on the things they enjoy, and that makes them feel like they're being dumped on for enjoying them. And they feel like it's punching down. Because when you have, give me $100 a month, shameless, and then you're saying it's all negative, it doesn't really, the praise that it's given is faint, and that's not fair to this game. Gamers start feeling like you're against them, rational or not. I understand it. And so hopefully you found this entertaining. Hopefully you found this informative. Hopefully it was a good example of just how different it is. And hopefully you guys felt a little more validated as gamers. And if there are any Watch Dogs developers watching this, oh, I can dream. Awesome job, guys. I really loved it. I wanted to do more on the awesome way you guys shoehorned female characters into a society that, a subculture that really doesn't have many women in it. And I wanted to talk about the awesomeness of Lenny and the awesomeness of Satara in greater detail, but maybe that's going to be a year-end wrap-up thing when more people have played the game. Because I don't want to take away the surprise too much, because the appearance of certain characters and the way they're unveiled is so friggin' cool. I thought it was great. It's one of my favorite games of this year, and I think that a good critic knows when not to criticize. They know when to praise. I wish we had another name. That's why I say analyst, because I analyze. I don't criticize. I don't look for things to pick on. If something sucks, I say it sucks. The movement rate was a little fumbly, but I worked around it, and who says it wasn't deliberate, right? And I hated the freaking e-cart driving, but I'm not prepared to say that was the game and not my skill level. And the driving in the first game, it's much improved from the driving in the first game. I will say that, hands down. So, I'm willing to accept my limits as a player and not criticize things that might just be because I sucked. But I have enough confidence in my own abilities as a player to do that. And I just think we need more voices, and we need more funded voices, and we need more people able to do this full time who are passionate about games. And I'd love to be in the situation where I could have so much money coming into this that I could start hiring people who don't necessarily agree with me, but share a love of games and are able to communicate that. And so they can completely disagree with me as long as they show consistently a love of video games and medium and, individual games when it's due. I'm awesome with that. Because it's the love, right? It's not the criticism. It's the love that really draws innovation and really drives art. So, hope you enjoyed that rant. Maybe I'll do more of them. I don't know. We'll see how this goes. This always makes me nervous because I'm afraid that people will take what I say out of context as opposed to in the spirit it was delivered in. But thanks for watching. Bye-bye.